La Nina is back, but winter in Central Texas is never straightforward. Arctic blasts can still hit fast, our aquifers are still struggling, and a warming climate keeps shifting what we should expect. Welcome to meteorological winter. Fittingly, we're here in a yurt on Lake Austin, just outside of Mozart's Coffee Roasters, to talk about what is usually our coldest and driest season here in Central Texas. And Kristen, we do these meteorological seasons, but most of the time it doesn't really get all that cold here in Central Texas until later in December or really January.
Yeah, and we've had some rotten Februaries recently within the last 5 years of seeing some pretty significant winter weather as well. So maybe a slow onset more often than not, but we tend to get our fair share of winter weather.
Now, Tommy, last winter was your very first winter in Texas.
That's right.
Of course, you spent a lot of your life in Massachusetts. What did you think of last winter?
Well, my back didn't hurt. I didn't have to shovel any snow, right? So that's one of the big things I noticed. But we had some nice pretty flakes in the start of February. And, you know, I thought we had a few good cold shots, but overall it was nice and mild.
Yeah, it wasn't too terrible of a winter last winter. Ended up being near average as far as temperatures go, but it did end up being drier than normal. And of course, drier than normal is a signature of La Nina winters. 80% of the last 5 winters have been La Nina winters, and here we go again. Roughly 5,000 miles southwest of Austin, in the waters of the Pacific Ocean near the equator, lies the key to our weather pattern each winter. If the surface temperatures of these waters are warmer than normal by at least ½ degree Celsius, the El Nino pattern takes shape. Cooler than normal by at least ½ degree Celsius, La Nina, a pattern responsible for 4 of our last 5 winters, and the pattern currently underway heading into this winter.
So we've gotten used to having a ridge in the central United States.
Texas A&M is home to the Southern Regional Climate Center and the office of the state climatologist, Dr. John Nielsen Gammon. He studies how climate patterns like our current La Nina impact Texas.
The tropical Pacific is a huge part of the globe, so if it's cool, then it's changing the whole difference in temperatures from the tropics to high latitudes, and that temperature difference that drives the weather that we experience. With a cooler tropics, then the jet stream tends to be weaker. It tends to be farther north where there's more of a temperature gradient, and so weather tends to miss us. The storms tend to happen farther north, and so we don't get as much time in the cold air, and we get more time in the warm air.
And yet, La Nina winters have brought extreme weather too, like the snowstorm of 2021 or the ice storm of 2023. Dr. Judy Dickey is a professor of meteorology at Texas A&M, and she wrote her thesis on the Arctic outbreak of February 2021. That cold and snow that knocked out power for days also came during a La Nina winter, which are usually warmer on the whole.
We get those big wavy jet streams, and that cold air that's just parked up to our north, now it can be dislodged and make its trek down to see us. Yeah, we have this average. We have this baseline where we say we should expect mild, slightly warmer than average. But that can be broken up by periods of terrible cold.
No 2 winters are identical, but meteorologists can look back at previous winters with a similar pattern to help loosely guide expectations for the coming season.
Winter of 2006-2007 was fairly similar, managed to barely be a La Nina. There was one in the 90s as well, but nothing from those winters really stands out as being particularly unusual, which is sort of what you expect given that temperatures in the tropical Pacific weren't all that unusual to start with.
Last winter may also be a comparable winter to this one, a weak La Nina. However, winter-to-winter comparisons are never perfect. Last winter's La Nina got off to a historically late start, not beginning until December. Our current La Nina began in September.
Seems like the weather takes a week or 2 in mid-latitudes to respond to what's happening in the tropics. So the earlier La Nina is set up, the longer lasting its impacts can be.
There is also another variable challenging seasonal forecasters this winter, the warm blob. an area of unusually warm water in the northern Pacific Ocean that can impact the weather on the continental U.S.
We don't really have a good historical analog for the entire North Pacific being several degrees warmer than normal going into the wintertime. All bets are off based on historical conditions.
So when unique weather pattern setups take shape, computer models help fill in the gaps.
I always hope for snow because I come from the Northeast, just like you.
That's right.
But I think we're going to be threadbare for snow this year.
You know, from a West Coaster born and raised, that's our rainy season is the winter. So it was a little bit of a change of pace for me coming to Texas, knowing that it's technically our driest season. As you mentioned, we normally don't average a whole lot of precipitation December, January, February to begin with. So when we're looking at a La Nina pattern that favors drier than normal conditions, that range gets smaller and smaller.
I think the last several months have clearly dictated that since the July 4th holiday floods. You know, we have not had much rain between the middle of July on to the present time.
Yeah, you know, the deficit that we've unfortunately gone through over the past couple of months, and seeing that, you know, beginning off, even just looking at, you know, the fall itself and just how dry it's been, already set us up for, you know, or set us in a bad position essentially going into the winter, you know. Unfortunately, because of what happened in July, we did see lake levels start to rise and whatnot, but there's still so much more that we need.
We're in a semi-arid part of the world, and sometimes we see what we saw in July, which is very wet. A lot of the time we see what we've seen over the last 2 months, which is very dry conditions.
The devastating floods in July brought over 900% of the normal amount of water into the lakes and rivers.
We're about 88% full and in pretty good shape compared to where we were this time last year going into the fall and winter months.
In June, the LCRA reported Lake Travis at 637 feet and Lake Buchanan at 1,000 feet. By August, Lake Travis rose to 673 and Lake Buchanan at 1,018 feet.
How much of the Colorado River do you guys service?
Sure. So the Lower Colorado River Authority is responsible for the lower 2/3 of the Colorado River system.
John Hoffman with the LCRA says the winter months usually see less water usage than the summer months, specifically for landscaping.
And it's a great time for people to think about, okay, what do I want to do to conserve water next year in the spring?
The rivers and the lakes, they service over 1 million people. When there's enough water, they release the water down to Lake Austin, and that helps out the city of Austin and utilities. But the same can't be said downstream as you get to some of the aquifers. They're in a bit more trouble as they don't have as much water.
Since January 2022, we're missing about 25 inches of rainfall. You know, getting slightly above average rainfall in July of this year isn't enough to close that rainfall deficit and get us out of drought.
The Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District focuses on the health of the spring water and the flow, which recently declared a Stage 3 exceptional drought on September 12, 2025. Only the second time in its history to do so.
What could happen is that we could descend into Stage 4 emergency response period, which our district has never entered before.
The district actually has 2 drought triggers, one of them being Barton Springs.
Justin Camp, a hydrogeologist with the Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District, takes measurements of the water's flow.
Without rain, water levels in wells and spring flows have been declining. And so here at Barton Springs, we're seeing flows that are measured in cubic feet per second in the low teens.
1 cubic foot is about the amount of water that would fill up a beach ball. So 13 beach balls about are coming out every second. But on average, flow from the springs is about 60 CFS, so 60 beach balls worth of water coming out every second. So right now we're seeing less than 1/4 of what flow should be at Barton Springs.
Average rainfall for December through February is 7.25 inches of rainfall. However, with the La Nina expected to persist, warmer and drier conditions are here to stay.
50% of Texans rely on groundwater for their sole water provider. People in the city of Buda and Kyle and in those communities around that area, they're really relying on the aquifers.
It's sort of a weird dichotomy. The rain that we've got filled or almost filled the lakes, but then the aquifers are still really in need of more rain of a different variety, almost a slower rain than the sort of runoff rain that feeds the lakes.
Yeah, unfortunately, and we've seen that time and time again, with the drought issues that had been persistent for the aquifers and the stage levels of drought that we've been going through with that. In speaking to them, the conservation district about what they've been going through and what they've been looking at, they said without this rainfall, they may have to go to stage 4, which is something they've never been at before. So almost unprecedented territory that we're going into.
It seems like to me there's 2 seasons. It's just a persistent drought with a heavy rainfall, right? It's either like no rain for weeks, or all of a sudden we're forecasting like 1 to 2 inches plus. And that's just something that has been going on since the summer.
Yeah, and it's another La Nina winter where we typically don't get a whole lot of rain here in Central Texas. Last winter was drier than normal, generally expecting this one to be as well, as the storm track often misses us. And even though La Nina winters can typically on the whole be warmer than normal, they can still bring wintry weather events, Arctic air too, and you looked into some of the preparations that have to be taken through certain organizations here in Central Texas, right?
If you look at, for example, Austin Bergstrom, they're not just working with their crew. They're on the phone with meteorologists. That's National Weather Service. That's KXAN meteorologists. They're working with FEMA. They're working with the airlines, the people that are on the ground. And since 2021, they've actually put in plows, which isn't really a common thing here in Central Texas. So it's just, preparing, hopefully not seeing any sort of big destructive widespread storms, but we have seen things like that happen before, especially with these weak La Nina winters.
Food insecurity is a 365-day-a-year issue, and it doesn't go away just because it's cold outside.
As president and CEO of Central Texas Food Bank, Sarivatsky worked through some big winter storms, the infamous winter weather outbreak in 2021 and the ice storm in 2023.
Just because, power might be out or there might be another natural disaster, it doesn't mean that people should have to eat things that they otherwise wouldn't.
Her team prepares meals months in advance.
Our facility can store over 6,000 pallets of items at any given time. And so if you look to the right, you'll see not only do we have a variety of items, but we have shelf-stable items that can be used by boiling water during times of disaster.
Getting that food is also a challenge, whether by road or air.
A lot of the time, our winter weather response is a lot of waiting and keeping an eye on the conditions in real time.
Samantha Haynes with Austin Bergstrom International Airport says they focus on prep ahead of the storm, like de-icing and removing snow. After the 2021 winter storm, the airport purchased several snow plows that can be mounted on trucks.
We go ahead and deploy our teams to set that equipment up and pre-stage it so that as soon as that snow starts to fall, we can begin pushing it and manually removing it from the runways, the taxiways, and the apron.
With new equipment ready to use, Sam is free to focus on communication and working with local meteorologists.
It's not just the weather here in Austin we have to be mindful of. You need to keep an eye on the weather at the airport you're flying to. Weather in other parts of the country can disrupt flights out of Austin.
Did the airport tell you how often they expect to use those plows?
Every few full moons, I guess, is the bare minimum.
Of course, 2021 was a La Nina winter, but it's a winter that we can barely try to forget. I mean, we really want to, but we can't.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking, just to neighbors, friends, essential workers, there's a lot of trauma there. There's a lot of scars because it was such a devastating storm, not just for Central Texas, but that winter storm of 2021 hit the entire state of Texas. And even if you do have, the handful of snow plows, when every small and big city in Texas needs snow removal, there's just not enough to go around.
This one was different. It hit Texas throughout the state.
Robert Aguilar spent 27 years in the airline industry. He was working on the tarmac at DFW Airport during the storm.
Airports like Houston, George Bush, we take Austin. You would never think in your life that you would need de-icing. Houston had the hurricanes, but this for the winter, no, never.
The historic February storm lasted 8 days, causing statewide impacts, at one point leaving over 4 million Texans in the dark with no heat. It seemed that the crippling storm shut down the entire state of Texas, but not everyone could stay home.
And the babies, they do not watch the weather.
Pam Braun was a registered nurse at St. David's North Austin Medical Center working in postpartum.
I knew that they needed me at the hospital, so we bundled up. I packed up my sleeping bag, and my husband and I just took his four-wheel drive, and a normally 45-minute trip took us almost 3 hours.
Surviving on trail mix, peanut butter sandwiches, and canned food, Pam and the nursing staff spent the week doing what they needed to do, caring for new moms and their babies.
Our patients were scared. They didn't want to be bringing home a newborn to a cold house with no water and no heat. We had to really work hard to make them feel that it was going to be okay.
The full gravity of the storm wouldn't be recognized until later. The Electric Reliability Council of Texas announced the grid was 4 minutes away from total collapse. Austin Travis County EMS had one of their busiest days ever, responding to over 1,300 calls in 24 hours, 69 of them being cold exposures and more than 100 falls on ice. The city of Austin would spend 144 hours, 6 full days, at or below freezing, a new record. Ultimately, the storm caused 246 deaths in Texas. But despite the scars and the trauma many were left with after the 2021 winter storm, there remains within most first responders and essential workers an enduring urge to help.
We get used to it in our business because it's our job.
At the end of the day, you go home and you realize that you made one person's life a little less uncertain, a little less crazy.
Obviously, snow is what most people think of when there's winter storms, but especially here in central Texas, you have that moisture from the Gulf and the Pacific. It doesn't really get below 32, and if we do get snow, it's not pretty snow, right? It's that disgusting slush.
Good point.
Tree limbs and power lines and things like that.
Unless you're a kid, then it's all good.
Then it's
right? If you're under the age of 12, a snowflake is a snowflake.
When it snowed an inch last winter, it was my daughter's first snow that she's ever seen. So
Cute.
we tried to figure out what sort of winter gear we could get her in and go down the sort of mini slopes that we have in our neighborhood. But hey, you make the most of the snow while we have it here, because I think it melted that afternoon. Rich, you've lived through several rounds of wintry weather here in central Texas. Of course, 2021 had that 140 hours plus that we stayed below freezing. In historical perspective, how would you put that winter?
For me, it was the worst of the storms that we had, given the duration of it here in Texas. You know, people moved to Texas to get away from stuff like that.
I was driving home to Austin from South Padre Beach.
Eric Hermes was one of millions of Texans caught in the grasp of the 2021 storm.
And it got so cold so fast and so icy so fast during that drive. My biggest fear was not getting home to my dog. Once I got home, my biggest fear was keeping power and keeping water.
He did lose power, but did not lose water. He says he considers that a blessing.
I grew up in Florida, so I've gone through hurricanes and knew how to overcome a power outage, but losing water in a home without a bathtub was something I wasn't prepared for. I've gone through several weather emergencies, and the 2021 ice storm, as I've called it, was the hardest.
That was an event that was likely going to happen regardless.
Shel Winkley with the science advocacy group Climate Central says these events are getting more intense and more frequent.
You can still have these really big cold snaps that might even be colder than what they would have been even in a more stable climate.
As our atmosphere continues to warm, it holds more water, making it possible for heavy snow events to occur.
When you look at Austin specifically, It's actually summer. That is the fastest warming season, but winter's not far behind. Our winters in Austin have warmed over 4 degrees just in the past 50 to 55 years.
As winter gets warmer, increased moisture makes it possible for more extreme events like heavier blizzards and ice storms during winter. But it's not all bad. Winkley says cold weather is important to Texas's trees and vegetation.
They need that time to relax, recuperate, get those chill hours so they can be ready to do their thing again the next spring.
Next time something like that happens, I think a lot of people are going to be more inclined to say, make sure that we're prepared, make sure that we're set, and that we don't have to deal with days and days and days of power outages.
It's really hard to look at those weather cameras over Austin and see big black spotches, knowing people are in their homes with no power on day 4, you know? So I agree. I think, you know, hopefully we're more prepared for the next time. Not that we would ever wish that for this winter, you know? I think I agree. I hope for a little bit of snow, but Arctic blasts, maybe a couple heading our way.
Yeah, and I think almost every time we're talking about either cold or wintry weather, people ask us, is it going to be like 2021?
Right.
And almost every time we have to say, hey, this is not a 2021 repeat, this is not a 2023 repeat, but still have to take each individual event seriously. So that brings us to what is our winter forecast. Of course, meteorological winter has started. Often it can get off to a slow start, but it lasts all the way through the end of February. So what are we thinking this year when we talk about the factors like a warming climate, a La Nina winter, a weak one, and a short-lived one at that, as well as the fact that the sudden stratospheric warming in the Arctic may be bringing some chillier air our way in December. We generally think, we discussed this all before we came together to talk with you today, that it is still going to be a warmer than normal winter, but maybe not by a lot, maybe between 0 and 1 degree above the winter average. From a perspective of how many Arctic outbreaks, you know, when it gets really cold, even during the afternoons, we think there could be about 3 to 4 of those. As far as wintry weather events where we could get some ice, maybe some snow for the kids, looking about 1 to 2 of those, but unfortunately from a rainfall perspective, it still looks like the typical pattern where a lot of that rain misses us and will probably be about 1 to 2 inches in a rainfall deficit of what we would typically get in a winter, right?
Yeah, correct. I definitely think so. And like we've talked before, while the lake levels will hold steady, the biggest concern is going to be those aquifers.
Yeah, the normal rain is inside of 8 inches between December, January, and February. And I don't think we're going to get even close to that number.
I should mention we've got a brand new KXAN weather app, redesigned, great images, updated map interface so that people can get more of what they want more quickly. And of course, it's still got a lot of the great stuff from the previous version of the app. So make sure you download the new app. And if you don't have the original app, what are you waiting for? Get that KXAN weather app in your phone and get you ready for winter. We thank you for joining us here in a yurt. Have a happy holiday season and have a safe winter.